Hey everyone, Moms Against Medical Bullying. So I wanted to get on here and go over the social distancing law project. Um, okay, let's see here. Okay, the camera's higher than me, but all right. So this is the document, the social distancing law assessment template, and I just want to start off by saying, why do they always prophesy a respiratory pandemic? Like, why can't we have a rotavirus pandemic or a diarrhea pandemic or like a pandemic where everyone starts to bleed out of their face or something? Not to be, disgusting, but I'm just saying, like, what are they doing to us that we are not aware of, that they know or they can foresee that there's going to be respiratory issues amongst people? And then another thing I wanted to mention was all these weird YouTube commercials that Wawa's put out on Walmart and Chuck E. Cheese with everyone wearing masks in the commercial. And I was thinking, if things are going to go back to being unmasked, why would these companies spend all this money, investing in making new commercials, showing our new masked society, right? And I mean, the politicians have been warning us. They've been saying they're taking us into a new normal. And yet the followers of these politicians are like, come on, everybody, just do it. Let's wear that mask and get it over and done with it. Well, it's like, well, hello, don't you realize there is no wear a mask and get it over and done with? They just said they're taking us to a new normal. So anyways, this is the social distancing law assessment template, a practical field-tested methodology to assess your jurisdiction's legal preparedness for pandemic influenza. July 2010. Okay. Here's a table of contents. Background to the social distancing law project. The assessment template. So let's see here. Introduction. This report has two purposes. First, it describes the social distancing law project as conducted by 15 states, the District of Columbia, Puerto Rico, in 2007, and by 9 additional states from 2009 to 2010 to assess their legal preparedness to implement social distancing measures during a potential pandemic. I'll skip some words that I don't care to say. Second, it provides all jurisdictions with a template they may use in conducting similar assessments. Okay. And then they talk about the 1918 thing that happened, which people offered other theories as to why that occurred. Global efforts to combat the next pandemic will rely on both pharma and non-pharma interventions, community infection control measures, blah, blah, blah. So obviously all of this is based upon the germ theory of disease. So they use the germ theory and try to make laws around that. What was it? The use of law-based community-wide infection control procedures, however, has not been widely practiced in the United States since the first half of the 20th century. New and re-emerging infections and the threat of an influenza pandemic have made it necessary to take a fresh look at the legal underpinnings of community infection control measures. So how do they know this? I don't know. Maybe they're studying patterns, which they probably do. But anyhow, at any rate, especially at the state level, where public health and other officials will direct frontline responses to the emergence of such potentially catastrophic threat. Such a potential. So this is sponsored by the U.S. Centers for Disease Control and Prevention and directed by the Association of State and Territorial Health Officials, as though, we can call them. So round one of the social distancing law project was conducted in 17 jurisdictions in 2007 to assess the sufficiency of their legal preparedness to implement social distancing effectively. In addition, the participating jurisdiction assess their legal authority to prescribe and dispense pharma drugs on a mass basis as a key potential countermeasure for the influenza pandemic. Many of these lessons learned during round one had direct relevance to all hazards public health emergencies, such as anthrax attacks and natural disasters, especially in identifying opportunities to enhance coordinated responses across public health and other agencies across local state and state boundaries. Responding to HSC and HHS directives. I'll just look at the first paragraph. In the fall of 2005, the president released the National Strategy for Pandemic Influenza, which was followed in 2006 by the detailed National Strategy for Pandemic Influenza Implementation Plan from the U.S. Homeland Security Council. So they want to improve preparedness for sickness. Nearly 200 of these action items were assigned to the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services. Many of those were assigned in turn to CDC and managed by the agency's Influenza Coordination Unit. My dog's always chewing on something. Hold on 1 second. Let me get a taller chair. Okay. Let's see here. The the Homeland Security Council Implementation Plan acknowledged the important role of social distancing measures, the important role these measures will play in helping reduce the impact of pandemic influenza, and also the need for governments at all levels to assess their legal capacity to flexibly respond to shifting circumstances during a pandemic. So that's what this is all about, right? Assessing legal capacity. The action items assigned to CDC stimulated creation and implementation of the social distancing law project. Generally, Chapter 6 of the Homeland Security Council Implementation Plan, which dealt with the protection of human health, called for providing guidance to all levels of government. All right. The role of public health. Law has long played a critical role in addressing both acute and chronic public health problems, dating back to John Snow's legendary and legally authorized intervention to remove the handle of the cholera-tainted Broad Street pump in London in 1855. So then they go on to talk about how it's so great that vaccination was added. We all know that's a farce. It's so crazy with the half-truths. Like, it's good that they wanted to clean water, but where does them using public health safety end? Where does it end? It doesn't. It's probably the perfect Trojan horse. So, let's see here. I'm gonna skip that. All right. Round one of the social distancing law project in 2007. CDC's Influenza Coordination Unit requested assistance from the CDC Public Health Laws Program to address the Homeland Security Center action items. Created in 2000, the Public Health Law Program's strategic goal is improvement of the public's health through law. More specifically, the program develops and disseminates tools to state, tribal, and local public health officials and their partners to improve the understanding and practical use of a law to support effective public health interventions. Project goals. The overall purpose of the Social Distancing Law Project is to assist the participating states in assessing the sufficiency or adequacy of their legal authorities, their legal preparedness to support effective social distancing measures in the context of an influenza pandemic. Participating jurisdictions also review their legal authorities to support mass distribution of drugs. Project methods. Okay. So practical and resource considerations precluded conducting the social distancing law project assessments in all 50 states in 2007. For this reason, CDC chose to focus on 17 jurisdictions, including both states and territories, that either hosted CDC quarantine stations or that bordered on jurisdictions that host these stations. Okay, the round one participating jurisdictions were Alaska, California, Connecticut, D.C., Florida, Georgia, Hawaii, Illinois, Maryland, Massachusetts, Michigan, New Jersey, New York, Puerto Rico, Texas, Virginia, and Washington. A key feature of the Social Distancing Law Project methodology is that the assessment of each jurisdiction's legal preparedness for implementing social distancing measures are conducted by its public health officials, their legal counsel, and public health emergency preparedness staff, and by other state personnel. This element of the project design ensures that those most familiar with the provisions and implementation of a given jurisdiction's relevant social distancing laws were those who identify, interpret, and assess their sufficiency. So these are the two things they want to focus on here. Legal assessments, and legal consultation meetings. So legal counsel to the public health agency for each of the 17 participating jurisdictions conducted an analysis of its social distancing laws and prepared a report detailing the sufficiency of those laws, both during and absent declared public health emergencies. The purpose of legal assessments was to identify and assess the sufficiency of the legal authorities to determine implementation of social distancing measures. Okay, and to give out drugs. And two is to identify any gaps, uncertainties, or ambiguities in those authorities. Legal consultation meetings and after action reports. 12 of the round one jurisdictions also conducted legal consultation meetings that were designed as one-day exercises that combined on-site review of the results of the legal assessments with a tabletop scenario to assess the sufficiency of legal authority for social distancing in the setting of a simulated influenza pandemic. Okay, and another thing I forgot to say in the beginning, guys, was that everything listed in this document that you will see is everything that has took place from March until now, and, probably into the future. I don't know. So they've pulled off what they wanted to do, essentially. They pulled off their plan. Except for the drug thing, which, anyways, The project guidance document included a scenario developed by the CDC Public Health Law Program that could be adapted to each jurisdiction's specific laws, along with suggestions for participants and for approaches to conducting the meetings. It was suggested that jurisdictions provide participants with a copy of their legal assessment report 2 weeks before the meeting so they could be familiar with the existing legal authorities. All right. Okay. Round 2 of the Social Distancing Law Project was from 2009 to 2010. And that included Alabama, Missouri, Nebraska, New Hampshire, North Dakota, Ohio, Oregon, Pennsylvania, and Utah. The Round 2 projects use the same tools and methods as in 2007, including this document, the Social Distancing Law Assessment Template. Attorney-conducted assessments of the participating states' current legal authorities for social distancing and legal consultation meetings. The participating states' principal findings were similar to those of the Round 1 states. Key findings were: the legal counsel concluded their states had adequate legal authority to implement social distancing measures, but that a number of important questions and gaps needed to be addressed. And also, additional work was needed to improve coordination across agencies and jurisdictions in implementing social distancing measures.
I can barely see it.
The template, an assessment tool for all jurisdictions. In addition to the assessments of the sufficiency of their social distancing laws that the Social Distancing Law Project facilitated, the Round 1 and Round 2 jurisdictions also demonstrated the practical value of the project's two-part methodology. Each jurisdiction appropriately modified the standard methodology that ASTHO and CDC staff had prepared for the project to reflect specific issues. Alright. Oh, she's coming out. Here's the template. Alright. The Social Distancing Law Assessment Template. Okay, let's look at the purpose. The Social Distancing Law Assessment Template is intended to be used by the public health officials of any state, tribe, locality, or territory as a tool to assess their agencies and jurisdictions' legal preparedness for implementing social distancing measures. They kind of say the same thing over and over again. Hey, bud, don't yell. Please? You can play with her, just can you try not to scream?
No.
So they kind of just say the same thing again and again. You know, legal preparedness. We're trying to check for the legal preparedness of the social distancing measures. The Social Distancing Law Template has 3 parts. Planning your jurisdiction's SDLP, assessing your jurisdiction's legal authorities, conducting a legal consultation meeting, and preparing an after-action report on the sufficiency of your jurisdiction's social distancing law, together with recommendations for any steps to address observed weaknesses and opportunities for improvement. Right. Planning your jurisdiction. Lukey, please. Planning your jurisdiction's SDLP. Identify project team members. Assessing your jurisdiction's legal authorities. Okay. So, all right. Let's go down to the questions. Okay. The actual, like, all right. Action steps section. Say something again. All right. Let's hear in the appendices. Legal assessment template. All right. So here's the template. And I think that the questions they ask are interesting because they ask for social distancing laws for a pandemic and not during a crisis, which is weird. I'll show you. Hey, please, I'm asking you. See, already they planned here. See, mass gathering, public place, closure of public places, restrictions on movement of persons. Okay. So this is, all the stuff here that this is all stuff that we're going through right now. Cancellation of mass gatherings. Dismissal of schools. All right. So this is their template questions. Restrictions on the movement of persons. Legal authorities to restrict movement of persons during a declared public health emergency. So identify the legal authorities that could enable, support, or authorize legal basis for the restriction of movement. So this is probably all the questions they had to answer for themselves. So, which officials are authorized to declare restrictions? Which officials enforce these restrictions? What legal authorities exist for group quarantine? Provide any due process measures for a person whose movement is restricted. Okay. And then sufficiency of legal authorities during a declared public health emergency. Are there gaps and shortcomings? Yada, yada. Quarantine enforcement during public health emergency. Sufficiency of legal authorities to enforce quarantine. Okay. And here is what I think is interesting, and I don't know why they include this. Legal authorities to restrict movement of persons in the absence of a declared public health emergency. Like, why would you want to restrict the movement of people in the absence of an emergency? I don't understand. So, so their job is to identify legal authorities and procedures. Lukey, I've asked you, please, not to scream, bud. That could enable, support, authorize, or otherwise provide a legal basis for any restrictions on the movement of persons in the absence of declared public health emergency. Examples could include the jurisdiction's legal authorities and procedures for quarantine, isolation, separation, or other orders for persons to remain in their homes. I mean, they kind of did this. They wanted everybody to stay home, but I don't think they were successful at enforcing that. Maybe, like I said in my last video, this was a simulation. Interjurisdictional cooperation and restricting movement of persons. And then kind of ask similar questions. Number 3, closure of public places. Legal powers and authorities to order closure of public places during a declared emergency. What are the powers and authorities authorizing closure? What powers and authorities prohibiting closure? Who can declare or establish closure? Who makes the decision to close a public place? Penalties. How long can the closure last? Can it be renewed?
Yes, I want it.
Gaps, uncertainties. Now they ask the same questions again. What are the legal power and authority to close public places in the absence of declared public health emergency? 4, dismissal of schools, which they had done successfully. They asked the same similar questions.
Don't do that.
And then again they asked dismissal public places in the absence of declared public health emergency. Cancellation of mass gatherings. They successfully did that one at first. And they asked the same questions. Legal authorities to cancel public gatherings, mass gatherings. What are penalties? What is the process for enforcing cancellation? Optional, number 6, mass prophylaxis, legal readiness. Mass prophylaxis is not a type of social distancing measure, but was included in round 1 of the SCLP. Given interest then in assessing the sufficiency of laws to support mass prophylaxis during a large-scale infectious disease outbreak. Legal authorities for issuance of blanket prescriptions and use of mass prophylaxis measures during an emergency. Which officials are authorized to make the decision to issue blanket prescription? How can you issue a blanket prescription? I mean, like we're all their property. All right, let's go on down. Legal consultation meeting template. The legal consultation meeting will convene key stakeholders to test the jurisdiction's ability to implement coordinated social distancing measures involving multiple agencies: public health, law enforcement, education, corrections. Okay. Objectives. The objective of legal consultation meeting are to convene key stakeholders using the outbreak of pandemic influenza scenario below, which may be customized to the specific needs of your jurisdiction. Identify ambiguities. Okay, participation. Senior level state health agency officials, including representatives from public health, preparedness, infectious disease. So I'm just gonna, okay, and then here's a page with their scenario. Outbreak of pandemic influenza. Facts and events in this scenario are specific too. The fact pattern below is predicated on a pandemic influenza scenario of much greater severity than H1N1 that began in 2009. While your jurisdiction's While your jurisdiction's response to H1N1 may help to guide your decision-making and planning, the intent of this hypothetical exercise is to test the sufficiency of your jurisdiction's legal authorities for social distancing measures and ability to coordinate across multiple agencies, blah, blah, blah. Okay. So their scenario was November 20th, within the past 30 days. Yeah, I don't even really want to read that. Illness typically presents as classic influenza. 20% of cases, illnesses rapidly progress to pneumonia. At-risk population include persons in all age groups, regardless of their previous health. And isn't that one thing that we have heard with this COVID thing? It attacks everyone in all age groups, no matter if you're in good health or in bad health. and the average incubation period.
Casey, it does follow.
So this is their scenario.
Hey, Mama, I guess I was right. Poppy does want to catch the train.
She does?
I saw her trying to get it.
Okay, what's this here? The Governor, Chief Executive Officer requests staff and the Pandemic Influenza Response Group to enumerate major events known to be planned throughout your jurisdiction. At a minimum, those include statewide pre-Thanksgiving school events, traditional family and social seasonal Thanksgiving gatherings, football game, opening of a new film. Okay, given this information, the Governor, Chief Executive Officer, has asked members of the Pandemic Influenza Response Group to assess the situation and offer opinions and merits of declaring a public health emergency. As part of this deliberation, the Governor is asking the Attorney General for key agencies, including Health Department, Public Safety, and Emergency Management, to confirm the status and sufficiency of authorities for the spectrum of measures that the Governor might need to order in effect imminently. Okay. So, and there is more to this, but I think I'm going to put it in a separate video. So, Homeland Security Council directives, the Michigan Legal Assessment Report. Michigan actually had their report included in here. And then I also want to go over the final page, which is kind of like in a study format here. This right here. And so I think I'm going to do that in a separate video. So yeah, that's about it.